Okay, so this story is gonna seem a bit random, but I saw this girl at Muay Thai practice who was wearing one of those Nike Pokemon themed t-shirts they sell at like Shein and stuff. Like, I'm pretty sure it's not official. And of course, me being a hardcore Pokemon fan, I was really excited there for a second because I was like, oh, holy crap, a Pokemon fan, here of all places. But then I remembered Pokemon is literally the biggest media franchise ever created. And just because she likes a Pokemon design enough to wear a shirt of it, doesn't mean she actually knows what UB04 Blaster Celesteela is, or the traumatic effects of neglective parenting on Narvin and Anne, and Lily, and Gladion. I guess those last two are more overbearing parenting than neglective parent, but anyway, what I mean is, Pokemon is huge nowadays. From Pokemon Go to TCG to the anime, there's so many avenues to the series, to the point where it's apparently a fairly common conversation topic in dating apps across like the younger generations to ask what the other person's favorite Pokemon is. Usually the expected answer to that would be like Eevee or Pikachu or something obvious and popular like that. And like specifically like here, this is Brazil. Like, I live in Brazil, so like there's not that many hardcore Pokemon fans right here. Most people can't even afford the consoles to play the games on. She probably wasn't a hardcore Pokemon fan. And even if she was, like it doesn't matter. That's not the point. What really struck me about that whole deal was not the question of if that random person was or wasn't a quote-unquote true Pokemon fan. It's more so the likelihood / possibility of her not being one, even though she was wearing a Gengar shirt that day. That made me realize how broad the audience for Pokemon really is in this day and age. Of course, many long-running popular franchises have a casual to hardcore sort of spectrum among their fans. That's to be expected. But I think Pokemon does this in a very special way that I haven't really seen anywhere else. Partially due to the size of the series in terms of popularity, as well as its complexity in terms of what it encompasses and all the creatures and designs it has. It's able to do a lot with that diversity and appeal without trying to overtly support a multi-billion-dollar business that's obviously in here to cynically make money first and foremost. It's possibly one of the best uses a franchise like this has ever done, having this huge market appeal and being so marketable and being so popular. Compared to something like, say, Star Wars. Star Wars is another very huge franchise that exists, that a lot of people like and has made a lot of money. And of course, there are also many levels of fandom to that. Some people are just fans of the movie, some people are just fans of the first 3 movies, some others watch everything that comes out all the time from Disney. But there's really one way to enjoy it. You watch it. I mean, you can buy the merch, you can have the toy lightsabers, they're awesome, but still, like, if you're a Star Wars fan, if you go ahead and say you're a Star Wars fan, it's assumed that means you're a fan of the movies first and foremost. Meanwhile, even in the more fan-centric Pokemon spaces, there's so many ways to enjoy the franchise. Not only in different formats, but in different ways in the same one. Just looking at the video games, we have competitive play, which can include VGC and or single stuff. We can play Nuzlocke, we can just play a normal casual playthrough, we can do shiny hunting, we can go for dex completion. If we look at the TCG, you can play competitive, you can just collect the cards, which was very popular not too long ago and continues to be a huge part of the Pokemon franchise nowadays. And it all kind of comes down to the reasons why you, as an individual, like the series. As in, what parts of the fandom and the franchise you engage with the most has a lot to do with you as a person, and what about Pokemon that really attracts you? You guys may remember, if you're a really OG fan of the channel, my old video about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I wouldn't recommend watching it nowadays. It's very old and very dated, and I wasn't very good at this stuff. But in that video, I praised it because, to me, that felt like, despite all the glitches and everything else, it pretty much checked all the boxes for what I would want from a Pokemon game. It's very focused on adventure and exploration, has a great story with great characters, it gave me a lot of freedom while still keeping me engaged in the world and having fun Pokemon creatures to find everywhere. Like, to me, that just checked all the boxes. It gave me an awesome, unforgettable adventure that, to me, is what I'm personally looking for in a Pokemon thing, and not just games, Pokemon in general. My personal attraction to Pokemon is mostly just the fantasy of being a Pokemon trainer. I know that sounds like very goofy and kind of like a little over the top, but like I'm trying to be abstract here with something that's I believe I'm far from the only one who like thinks like this, right? I started with the Pokemon anime, like the original first season of the Pokemon anime. That's how I first got into the series. And you know, that whole thing has the original English theme song, like I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was, dun dun dun. And it's very focused on Ash Ketchum's journey, becoming a Pokemon master and trying to beat the gyms and fight the league and going on this adventure where he, of course, he befriends the Pokemon, but he also befriends a lot of different people, a lot of different trainers, meets so many different folks and goes to so many different places while also, you know, grinding, training, competing. To me, that experience of being a Pokemon trainer is the appeal of Pokemon. It's the action, it's the adventure, it's the people you meet along the way. Pokemon Sun and Moon, the games, would also be very formative to me. As games as a whole, they pretty much got me into story-heavy RPGs, and the story still means a lot to me to this day. I've talked about this multiple times in this channel already. And I later also got into difficulty hacks in Pokemon VGC as well, you know, the competitive side. Because again, since I'm trying to sort of like roleplay into this Pokemon trainer journey type of thing, of course I would be attracted to, one, difficulty hacks that make this experience a little bit more engaging, a little bit more immersive, since it makes it closer to how difficult it's supposed to be in universe, and VGC because it basically just makes you a Pokemon trainer in real life. You're actually going to compete in Pokemon battle tournaments IRL. It's freaking awesome. When I picture what I like about Pokemon, I imagine like a badass trainer with their team of 6 diverse and cool creatures and the memories of all the friends they made along the way. I know, very cheesy. It's fine. What I mean is, like, to me, that is Pokemon. That journey, start to finish, fighting the league, meeting people. It's a contemporary RPG, where instead of fighting with swords and magic, it's about fighting in organized competition with these cool monsters you tame yourself. My favorite Pokemon tend to be the edgier ones with like cool powers and stuff, or at least ones that are very diverse and like unique looking. Like, yeah, I like some cute Pokemon. I like Sylveon, for example, but to me, Sylveon, keeping with the RPG analogy, would be like the cute cleric slash magician girl that's on the party that is there to kind of like spice up and not make everyone just a random spiky haired swordsman. It's about that spice. It's about keeping the team unique and expressing myself through my team and the battles that they go on. But even over the creatures themselves, I've been engaging a lot more with the personal journeys of the human characters in the series. Again, I talked about role-playing a bit, and like, when I play the games, ever since I was a kid, I like to put my own name on the trainer. I like to, when there's customization involved, I like to make the trainer look like me. I know, very corny, very cringy, I don't mind, but what I mean is, to me, that journey is Pokemon. That's what I like about it, which is why I gravitate to the games with deeper stories, because I like seeing the characters grow alongside me. I like meeting these peoples and sort of like in a abstract, you know, fictional sense, befriending them. Like the characters from Scarlet and Violet, like they're cool, they're like my little fictional friends that I like to spend time with. To me, that's part of the appeal to Pokemon, even over the creatures themselves. Now, you may think that's obvious, but apparently no. I've been seeing this growing sentiment among, you know, fans, especially like older fans, of wanting more slice of life Pokemon media, focusing on the creatures themselves and how ordinary people who aren't necessarily Pokemon trainers go about their lives in the school world with all these cute and unique creatures. When I say slice of life, I don't even mean like the Sun and Moon anime that's, you know, more leaning on characterization and funny slice of life moments. I mean like Pokemon Concierge. You know, Pokemon trainers be damned, this is about normal people living with Pokemon and cute Pokemon doing cute things. And people love Concierge for that. As for me, I mean, I think the idea is adorable. I'm not a monster. Don't get me wrong, all these things are a spectrum. I can still enjoy Pokemon being cute, and I can still enjoy more laid-back stories in this world for the sake of world building, for the sake of just, you know, sitting back for a bit and enjoying something different. That said, I still haven't watched Concierge to this day. I will. Like, it seems good. This isn't me, like, ignoring the show because, it's not my thing. No, I just kind of forgot, and I'm not super interested in it because it's not what I'm into Pokemon for. Being a Pokemon trainer and interacting with other Pokemon trainers is the biggest part of the appeal of the series for me. When I was watching the Pokemon Horizons anime, I always assumed the cute little cutaways where they just make the cute Pokemon do cute things for a minute or two to be mostly for the little kids who like Pikachu and stuff, and mostly just taking away from the story. While I tolerated and accepted them, I thought they were mostly there for marketing's sake and not because the team behind it felt passionate about it anyway, because I was very much mostly just interested in the Voltaculars, your relationships, their growth, and the overarching mystery of that story. And I always assumed that we were kind of on the same page about that we were all kind of looking into the series from the same perspective. But then my friend Sushi, they actually showed up in one of my streams lately. They're in the Discord if you want to go meet them. They're chill. They've been getting into Pokemon lately, and they asked me what's a good cozy Pokemon show to watch just to see the Pokemon being cute and interacting with people. They are very much an established fan of cute little critters, so it makes sense. And to that, I answered Concierge, but then I also said the best anime to start off with is probably Horizons if you're curious. Anyway, what I mean is that yes, there are people who are interested in specifically that over the idea of being a Pokemon trainer, over traveling the world to become the very best. People just want to see the cute creatures. You know, they're like little fantastical pets. I kind of get it now that it's put like this, even though it's really not the reason why I'm into Pokemon. For so many people, the little creatures come first, not the trainers, not the journey, not the adventure. The Pokemon, because they're so cool and cute, and it's been very interesting seeing Sushi getting into the games because they played Black and White first, and they seem to really appreciate that message at the end where like Anne talks about how you were right for taking care of the Pokemon and caring about them and your bond with them. And, you know, to me, when I played this game, like, to me, that's kind of a given. That's the generic Pokemon message. We've heard it over and over again. But to someone who's engaging with the series for the first time and is so enamored by all these different unknown creatures to find and is trying to grow a bond with them and getting attached to their first team, it hits hard in a way that I couldn't really recognize, to be honest. They're also playing Sun and Moon, right? And they went crazy about the idea of the Pokemon refresh gimmick, you know, where you can pat the Pokemon and feed them stuff. Like, to me, that was just kind of a whatever, you know, like a cute little thing. I'm here for the battles, I'm here for the journey. But some people just like petting the Pokemon. Some people just like feeding the Pokemon. They're like little pets. Yeah, I never really thought about it like that. But even then, caring for the little creatures and battling are not the two ways to like Pokemon, are the two reasons to enjoy the series. There's also the collection aspects. You know why so many people seem to be so angry about the Dex cuts in Pokemon Sword and Shield, and I just didn't care that much? That's because some people like completing the entire Dex and having every single Pokemon in the games, and transferring their old Pokemon into the new games is like a ritualistic, like important thing for them. That's not really as important to me because that, again, not what I like Pokemon for, but that doesn't mean it's not the reason why someone else might like Pokemon. The whole reason I dropped Pokemon Go was, despite, you know, the whole awesome appeal of catching Pokemon in real life yourself, the battles themselves are like really shallow and it doesn't really replicate the Pokemon trainer experience that you see in the games and the anime and the manga in the same way. The lack of one-on-one battles early on during the game's life for a good few years kind of adds upon that. And like, even looking at it nowadays, I don't play it as much anymore, but whenever I go into the Pokemon regionals and like I'm playing VGC, but I see like the people playing Go and the plucking meta is just whack as hell, just some random ass Pokemon. It's very much not what I'm used to and not what I'm looking for. It's a very collection driven game. And beyond that, you know, making art, collecting shinies, doing Pokemon contests, you know, in universe, Nuzlocke, liking storytelling, exploration, watching movies, anime, stop motion stuff, playing and collecting cards, wearing a Nike shirt themed around Gengar. There's so many ways to enjoy Pokemon. It means so many different things to different people. And that was originally where this video was gonna end. There's gonna be a discussion on the broadness of the appeal of Pokemon through its multimedia ability, is that a word? I don't think that's a word. And how that means that it can be enjoyed in so many different unique ways, which was something I never really thought about beforehand. But ever since I had the idea for this video, I've had a few realizations. Mostly what this all means for a franchise the size of Pokémon. Now, this may, on top of everything I said, sound even more cheesy or horrifying depending on how you look at it, but hopefully in a cool way. Through this time, I remembered a question a friend asked me, like when I was really young and this friend and I were getting into Pokemon as like 10-year-olds. He asked me as like a hypothetical, if you lived in the Pokemon world, would you want to be a trainer or would you want to just hang out and do your own thing? I, of course, being who I am, I naturally said, yeah, I would love to be a trainer and travel the world and capture Pokemons and battle in the league. That sounds awesome. Now, the friend back in the day, maybe just trying to be different, answered that no, he would just like to vibe and do his own thing because Pokemon wouldn't be the only thing in the Pokemon world. It's still inspired by mostly contemporary life and technology, so you could still theoretically be an accountant in the Pokemon world, and that's fair, you know? But then I kept ruminating on this question, and I just remembered it out of nowhere. In the Pokemon world. In the Pokemon world. And it hit me. You don't need to live in the Pokemon world to make this choice anymore. Pokemon is so broad, it's basically created its own sort of pseudo-reality in the collective consciousness of nerds around the world, or like young people in general by now. Millennials onward. Remember what I said about the random dating app question that people seem to make surprisingly often? You know, where they ask, what's your favorite Pokemon? And that means that, you know, any random Joe knows at least a little bit about Pokemon. They know what they are. It's not something where like you create a character, you create a fictional character, you write a book, and then you go into the street and you ask people random questions like about the characters you created in that book. If they haven't read the book, they're not gonna know anything about your story, like naturally, obviously. But Pokemon is at a point where like you can go into the street and ask anyone about Pikachu, or maybe if you're like Eevee, Charmander, Charizard, Mewtwo. People are gonna know these. People are gonna recognize this. They're probably gonna have some sort of attachment to that. Pokemon fans literally have a space in their brain. Like there's a study, it's a fairly old study. There's a study that indicates that like people who grew up with Pokemon have like allocated space in their brains. Like our brain chemistry is literally built different. It developed differently because it has this whole area dedicated to knowing Pokemon. Most of us fans can literally name them in the hundreds. Like if you ask me to sit down and just start naming Pokemon, we would be here for possibly hours. And I'm far from the only one. I made a video about VGC not so long ago where I tried encouraging you guys to get into it and trying it out too because it's so fun. And one of the things I mentioned there about the whole like being a trainer RL thing, which I also kind of touched on this video as well, was how the marketing and sometimes, you know, like announcers and stuff would refer to the players as trainers, Pokemon trainers. Back then, I appreciated the roleplay aspect and didn't know how far it really reached. To me, it was just kind of, yeah, neat. It helps the whole idea that, yeah, you're going out there and basically battling in the real life version of the Pokemon League. But like, this goes so much further beyond than just the competitive aspect of the series. If you played a Pokemon game once, if you own a few of the cards, if you played Pokemon Go and went around walking around the middle of the street looking for Pokemon, like people literally go in the wild looking for Pokemon in Go, and like for a good while there back in 2016, like people were doing that in groups. People could scream Dragonite and people would come in waves looking for it. That's not like a normal thing. There's some degree of collectively agreed reality with it. It's kind of crazy. Back in one of the tournaments I attended for VGC, we talked about this idea that playing VGC is basically being a Pokemon trainer in real life. And we kind of joked about them in the future doing this sort of like Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime hologram type thing for the battles, where maybe in the far future Pokemon would stop being just a video game and like these battles could be displayed in like a pseudo VR, AR realistic fashion, which would be dope. It was mostly a joke, and I'm not saying that's necessarily gonna happen, but with the way TPCI itself seems to treat the series as more so a lifestyle thing than anything else, calling the fans trainers and constantly updating stuff like the anime on a weekly basis, giving DLC and new releases for the games, releasing new sets for the card game, etc, etc. It's almost like something like that is kind of inevitable in the future. They're kind of wanting us to treat the series like that as well. The way the franchise is promoted nowadays, you're almost expected to treat it as a constant part of your life. There's always going to be something new coming out, and you're always going to be keeping up with it. Pokemon is always going to be there. And yeah, the moral implications of that, kind of dubious, maybe even bad, that we have like this massive corporation dictating what we do on our day-to-day as we're super comically invested in this fake reality of fictitious creatures that do not really exist in real life. But hey, it's really fun, so who am I to complain? That combined with the recognizability of the series, again, creates this sort of weird pseudo-reality for the series where like, okay, Pokemon themselves are of course not real, but in a lot of senses, they might as well be. People recognize Pokemon better than they recognize like real life animals sometimes. Like again, talking back to the whole like naming hundreds of Pokemon thing, like I swear to God, I'm pretty damn sure that I know way more Pokemon creatures than I know real life animals. When you catch a Pikachu in a Pokemon game, it's not the same thing as like, I don't know, taming a slime in Dragon Quest. When you do something like that in one of those other games, it's mostly like, oh yeah, my little character in this little fictional world has this monster now, and he's gonna help me out in my fictional adventure. Now, catching a Pikachu, maybe not a Pikachu because that's such a normal Pokemon to find, but that has more social merits. You can trade this Pokemon with other people. You can bring it to real life competitions and actually make money off of it by winning. It's a Pokemon that not necessarily your fictional trainer in the universe only has, but you have. You can trade it, you can transfer it to the next games. You can show off to other people, oh, I caught this shiny Dratini or something, and that's you. You caught it, you have that Dratini. It's yours, it's your possession. If you want a Pikachu plushie, and you bring it around to like a tournament or something like people like to do for VGC, where they like to bring plushies of their favorite mons, that's your partner Pokemon. We recognize that as just a Pikachu. There's literally like a very popular, booming investor market for TCG Pokemon cards. You know, pieces of paper with Pokemon in them. They mean nothing. They're literally just prints with pretty art on them. But it's the fake value we attribute to them based on this pseudo-reality of assuming Pokemon in a sense are kind of real because we treat them as such that they get value. It's not some random piece of paper with Charizard drawn on it. No, it's the Charizard card from 1999 that's like super popular or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? There's value to this stuff, and the value only exists because of this sort of a collective lie we basically agreed to believe in, that in a very abstract sense, Pokemon are kind of real. Like if you compare that to maybe other multiplayer games and stuff, I don't think any Marvel Rivals player sees themselves as like a superhero. Wanna be a superhero, sure, everyone does. But if you go around saying you're Spider-Man, you're delusional, right? And we can all agree that. Meanwhile, yeah, people may look at you weird if you go around saying you're a Pokemon trainer on the street. We kind of are Pokemon trainers. If we go battling, if we go hunting for Pokemon, be in Pokemon Go or shiny hunting in the games, we are fulfilling that idea of being a Pokemon trainer. And there aren't many other franchises that follow the same idea, that go in the same direction. It's very hard to achieve. The closest I can imagine is franchises based around more physical activities like toys and stuff, like Beyblade. Yeah, I guess if you battle Beyblades, you're literally doing what they do in the show, and therefore you are a blader. If you play Yu-Gi-Oh, you're about as close to being a duelist as like in the Yu-Gi-Oh anime as it's ever gonna be possible. But even if you look at something that's often compared to Pokemon, like Digimon is very much high fantasy. None of us who play or watch Digimon see ourselves as actual Digi chosen or Digimon tamers. That's just not a thing. There's no way to properly fulfill that idea in real life. Meanwhile, Pokemon, there's like multiple ways to do it. It's special, it's something only Pokemon has achieved, and only Pokemon can really achieve at this day and age. But you know what's also special? You watching this video through to the end, because yeah, that's about all I wanted to talk about today. Thanks so much for watching. If you have anything to add to this conversation, make sure to do so in the comments below, and see y'all next time!